Sarah's brother Simon and his friend Daryl are hiding something about Nick's case from the police. When Detective Roshan informs Paya about him being in Sacramento to meet Simon, Paya drives there as well. On her way, she is looking at Simon's socials and sees he has posted a picture of him and Daryl the day Nick was kidnapped. She goes to the motel Roshan is staying in and meets him. Paya points out the picture Simon posted and claims that it could be fake because the rest of Simon's feed is only politics. Roshan says he notices that himself, but doesn't react much. Paya asks him what they should do now and moves forward towards Roshan. They make out, but Roshan stops her midway, saying that this could lead to being taken off the case. Meanwhile, Simon is packing his luggage hurriedly to run away from the city. As he packs, the box with Sarah's belongings catches his eye. He brings it out and reminisces about his sister. The scene changes to 3 months prior, when Simon is devastated after Sarah's death. He has seen the last text messages exchanged between Sarah and Jeremy and blames the man for killing his sister. He reads his sister's journal, where she has written everything that Jeremy has ever told her. From the journal, Simon and Daryl find out that the couple planned to meet at an Oakland Lynx game. From this information, they figure out Jeremy is actually Nick and are able to get his address and personal information. The morning Nick got abducted, Simon and Daryl waited for him on his daily route to work. A nervous Simon sedated him forcefully and took him inside the van. Back in the present, Simon is about to leave the city when he is approached by Roshan and a police officer. They want him to come to the police to get his official statement. Simon obliges and gets inside his own car while the officers get in the police vehicle. But before they can leave, Simon gets out of the car and runs away. Roshan follows him behind and a chase ensues between the two. At the same time, Paya goes to Simon's apartment building and sees Daryl trying to run away. He recognizes her and asks her what she is doing there. Paya sees a gun on the man and stays quiet. Daryl tries to abduct her, but she manages to strike him with her keys and escapes. Simon, on the other hand, is eventually caught. While being arrested, he thinks of the events that happened after they abducted Nick. The scene cuts to 11 days prior. Nick is kept in a van with his hands tied. After he regains consciousness, he asks the abductors why he is there. Daryl angrily tells him about Sarah, but Nick claims he doesn't know her. When he asks what happened to Sarah, an enraged Simon hits him in the face. They make him write "I abuse women" and "At 5 million views, I die" on the paper and videotape it. Simon uploads it to the internet, saying that Nick's life is now officially over. Daryl, however, is still not satisfied. He writes "I killed a woman" on the third paper and makes Nick pose with it. Nick retaliates, saying he didn't kill anyone. He asks Simon how his sister died and finds out that she killed herself. Nick asks more questions about her death, angering Simon even more. He punches Nick repeatedly, making him sob in pain. After a while, the video reaches 3.5 million views. Nick asks Simon what makes him think Nick killed his sister. Simon pulls up his dating profile on his laptop and shows it to an utterly surprised Nick. Nick claims that it is not his profile because he has a wife and 2 kids. Simon, in turn, tells him about Sophie cheating on him, which surprises Nick because he hadn't told this to anyone yet. When Nick still denies knowing Sarah, Simon shows a picture of him and Sarah on a beach. Nick claims that it is clearly photoshopped, but the other two don't believe him. Sometime later, Nick tells Simon that his father also killed himself. He reveals that he and Paya had found their father's body when they were just kids. Since Nick also has a sister, he knows what Simon must have gone through. Nick tries to reason with Simon, saying that he knows how it feels to lose a loved one. He then asks Simon to show him that picture again. Simon brings out the picture and sees the level of the horizon doesn't match, so the picture is clearly edited. Right then, Daryl calls Simon outside, saying that the video is at 4 million now. Back in the present, Simon sits in the interrogation room with Roshan. The detective asks him about his relationship with Nick, but Simon doesn't speak. Instead, he asks to speak to Nick's sister. Roshan is surprised, but asks Paya to come in anyway. She sits in front of Simon, who stays quiet for the most part. Paya reminds him that although he avenged his sister's death, he will never get to be with her or hug her again. She is gone, and nothing will bring her back. At last, she asks him what he accomplished by killing her brother. We are then taken back to the time the video had just hit 5 million views. Simon and Daryl are outside the van. An excited Daryl hands Simon a gun, saying that it is now showtime. Daryl opens the van's doors, but is instantly attacked by Nick, who has freed himself. Daryl asks Simon to shoot Nick, but he doesn't. Nick runs away, but is still followed by Simon. He soon finds Nick and holds him at gunpoint. Nick explains that whoever did this had access to his family photos, his life, and his marriage. He knows who it is because he had only told one person about his wife's affair. Nick promises to find the person who drove Sarah to her death and begs Simon to leave him. At last, Simon lets him go, revealing that he, in fact, didn't kill Nick. Simon apologizes to Paya and tells her that he let Nick go. Roshan, however, doesn't believe him. In the following scene, we see Nick's son, Ethan, texting someone named Allison about the murderer being found. He thanks her for being there for him all this time. The next day, the brewer's sons return to school for the first time since Nick's disappearance. It is easier for them because Sophie teaches at the same school. She asks the boys to stay out of trouble and leaves. Kai's friends welcome him back, but Ethan is confronted by a bully. The bully makes jokes about Sophie's relationship with Curtis, which angers Ethan, but he doesn't react. Kai, who has been listening to the conversation nearby, loses his temper and attacks the bully. They get into a fight, which is stopped when Ethan pulls Kai away. The bully's nose is left bloodied after. Later, both Ethan and Kai are at the principal's office with Sophie. Ethan texts his internet friend, Allison, saying he might be in trouble. At night, the family is having dinner when Ethan asks Paya what Nick's murderers looked like. Paya answers that they looked sad. She then reveals that Simon said he let Nick go because he realized he had gotten the wrong person. Andrea says the killer is obviously lying, but Paya believes him. Sophie takes her aside and asks her to keep the conspiracy theory to herself. She doesn't want to give her kids false hope that their dad might have been a good person. Sometime later, Ethan is in his room texting Allison again. He tells her about Paya's theory, making Allison question more about the matter. He then watches a video of Mandy, the artist who is one of the girls Nick met online. She says that she had never met Nick in real life. This shocks Ethan, because now, the only person alive who has claimed to meet Ethan is Emma, and if she is lying, Nick might be innocent. Ethan texts Allison about this as well. The following day, Sophie leaves for work, leaving the boys behind. Ethan calls Paya, but she doesn't pick up, so he goes to her work to meet her. He then tells her that Nick never met Mandy, making her believe that Nick might be innocent. Paya calls Emma to ask her, but she doesn't pick up. The two then go to the police station to inform Roshan about the matter. Meanwhile, Sophie finds out from the principal that the bully's parents are trying to press charges against Kai. She requests that she arrange a mediation so she can talk to the parents directly. The principal agrees to do it, but suggests to Sophie that she and her kids should leave the school to avoid more chaos. In the meantime, Paya tells Roshan that Mandy has never talked to Nick, but Roshan dismisses her because that doesn't prove anything. He says he will give Emma a call to confirm and continues to another case. While returning home, Paya sees Ethan texting someone constantly and asks him who it is. Ethan reveals that it is his internet friend who he likes. Paya asks him to make sure he is not being catfished. When he returns, Sophie then asks Ethan to stay home and leaves with Kai to meet the bully's father. Ethan goes through his and Allison's messages and notices a pattern of texts where she urges him to tell her more about Nick's case. He quickly asks her to meet him in real life, but she claims she cannot meet him because she has an anxiety disorder. Ethan realizes that he has been catfished. He throws his phone away in frustration, but receives another text from Allison. She has sent him her location, so he quickly leaves to meet her. When he finally knocks on her door, a middle-aged man greets him. Ethan calls him out for catfishing him, but the man turns out to be Allison's father. He then meets Allison, who invites him in. Meanwhile, Paya goes to Vince again to ask him to figure out who was pretending to be Nick in the dating profiles. Vince, in turn, tells her about Tara, the girl who dropped out of the volleyball team after arguing with Ben. She might be able to tell who was behind the fake profiles. In the meantime, Allison and Ethan instantly bond and start talking about Nick's case. Allison suggests Ethan call Emma on his own because she might answer his calls, since he was supposed to be her stepson. The two get her social media profile and video call her. To their surprise, she picks up the call. Ethan greets her and directly asks her if she has met his dad. At first, Emma says that they were in love, but then nervously admits she never met him. Allison videos the conversation. After the call, Allison tells him that if she gets the pictures that fake Nick sent to Emma, she can use the metadata to find where they were sent from. Ethan promises to ask Emma for the pictures and leaves. Paya, on the other hand, goes to meet Tara, who tells her that she and Nick were fighting because he didn't want her to leave the volleyball team. It turns out that Nick's coworker Matt and Tara had an affair. When she ended the relationship, Matt uploaded her nudes to the internet. Nick was helping her through the situation and not abusing her. Paya is beyond surprised to hear this. She realizes that Matt's the one who made those fake dating profiles and rushes to his work to confirm. She barges into his office and asks another coworker, Dawn, to unlock Matt's computer, which she reluctantly does. At first, she finds Tara's pictures. Then, she sees every picture used in Nick's dating profiles on Matt's computer. She is now sure that Matt is the culprit. Paya takes pictures of the computer's screen as evidence. In the meantime, Ethan sends the pictures to Allison for her to find out the address. Kai barges into his room and sees him closing the tabs abruptly. He asks him what is wrong, but Ethan dismisses it. Sophie calls them down to have a chat. She tells them about wanting to transfer to a different school for a fresh start. Ethan takes this opportunity to show her the video of Emma admitting that she never met Nick. Hearing this, Kai sneaks into Ethan's room and goes through his computer. Just then, Allison texts Ethan the hacker's address. Kai reads the messages and figures out the address is of the person who stole Nick's identity. In the meantime, Paya calls Roshan and tells him about the pictures she found on Matt's computer. Roshan thinks she is overreacting at first, but then believes her. When Paya gets to her apartment, Matt is waiting for her outside, asking her why she broke into his office. Paya accuses him of abusing Tara, but he denies posting the pictures online. He gets aggressive, but leaves when Paya's roommate arrives. Meanwhile, Sophie checks up on her sons and finds Kai missing. We see Kai on his way to the address that Allison had sent Ethan. He wants to take revenge on the person who faked being his dad, and even has a baseball bat with him. Back home, Ethan checks the Find My Fam app and sees Kai has turned his phone off. Sophie gets more worried by the second and calls Paya. Just then, Ethan notices Allison's last text and figures out where Kai must have gone. The scene changes to Nick's very first day at work. Matt takes him in and introduces Nick to the administration manager, Dawn Gleed. Back in the present, Kai finally reaches the address and knocks on the door. Dawn opens the door and invites him in. She and her husband Ed share a knowing look while telling the boy to make himself at home. Paya and Sophie make their way to the address in their own cars. Kai now sits with the old couple in their dining room. He asks them about the catfish, but Dawn jokingly says they used to have a goldfish. Kai feels uncomfortable and says he wants to return home. Instead of answering the boy, Dawn asks Kai if his mother knows where he is. Kai lies and says he told everyone before coming here. Ed offers to drive him home and goes to his room to get the car keys. Dawn follows him behind nervously. After that, Ed brings out a gun, blaming Dawn for getting them into this mess. We are taken back to Nick's first day at work again. Dawn helps him set up his computer, and in the process, gains access to pictures from his phone and his social media credentials. When she returns home that day, we see her lifestyle has been repetitive and boring for the past several years. At night, she is in front of her computer. Dawn excitedly logs into a dating app as Nick. One day, at work, Dawn comes across Nick day drinking in his office. She asks him what is wrong, and Nick tells her about Sophie's affair. He trusts her enough to go into details, which she later tells the girls, who she talks to as Nick. Back in the present, Sophie and Paya get to Dawn's address and break inside the house. No one seems to be home, but the two find Dawn and Ed's picture, realizing that she was responsible for stealing Nick's identity. Meanwhile, the couple nervously drives Kai away from his home. Dawn throws Kai's phone out when he tries to call his mother. Kai begs the two to let him go. They stop the car at a ranch and put the boy inside a trailer. Dawn is nervous because of the gun Ed possesses, but Ed says that he is not going to jail at all costs. At the same time, the police locate their car in the ranch and drive towards it. Dawn nervously tells Ed she didn't mean to hurt anyone. Ed, in turn, asks her if she was in love with the women she talked to as Nick, but Dawn says she was just lonely and wanted to live a few moments as a young person like Nick. A flashback shows Dawn using a voice-changing app to talk to Emma on the phone. She tells her how much she loves her as Nick. That night, she mistakenly leaves her laptop open and her messages are revealed to Ed. He is furious with her for stealing someone's identity just to do something so childish. Dawn begs for forgiveness, but Ed walks away. Right then, Sarah sends her the texts, threatening her to commit suicide. An enraged Dawn texts back that she doesn't care, driving Sarah to actually kill herself. When Simon let Nick go that day, he ran to Dawn's home directly because he knew she was the only one who had access to his photos, and the one person who he told about Sophie's affair. Nick confronts Dawn for stealing his identity and asks her to come with him to the police. Just then, Ed, from behind Nick, hits him on the head with a hammer, killing him instantly. Back in the trailer, Kai manages to break the glass window and escape. The couple runs after him. After they leave, the police arrive at the trailer. They spread out looking for the couple and the kid. The police finally find Dawn and arrest her. She claims that her husband has Kai and begs the police to let her see Ed because only she can stop him. They soon find Ed holding Kai at gunpoint. Dawn apologizes and lovingly asks her husband to let the child go. He does as she says, and Kai finally gets to Sophie. Ed sobs and points his gun at the police, causing them to shoot him dead. Dawn hugs her husband's limp body on the ground, but is soon dragged away by the police. Roshan finally drives the Brewer family back home. Then, we see Sophie put Nick's picture back up in the house again, knowing that her husband was the person she knew and loved, after all. The scene cuts to Nick's funeral. Roshan tells Paya that Tara has decided to press charges against Matt. Sophie stands at the entrance of the funeral, feeling overwhelmed, but Paya manages to reassure her that they will get through this by supporting each other as a family. The series ends as the two walk into the funeral home together. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.